Hi there! Welcome back to our weekly Happy Tuesday. So, how's everything going for you? Are you doing okay? I'm doing okay. The optimism from last week is maintaining, so how's it going for you? You doing okay? God, it stinks in here. This time of year, I put out a garden every summer, so this time of year is the time of year to start your seeds, get them sprouting and stuff. So I have this setup where it's a tray with a styrofoam insert with a bunch of holes in it, and you put dirt plugs in these holes, and then you put the seeds in the dirt plugs, and you close it all up, and you put water in it, and it becomes this moist, wonderful environment. Well, my little styrofoam thingy, I know styrofoam floats, but it's still porous. This thing's old. By this point, it's maybe 6 years old. That's 6 years I've been using it, and there's some sort of biome growing in there that stinks like swamp water, so it's making my beautiful writing room stink. So, like, if I make a face every now and then and look down over there, this thing stinks, and I can't have anything open while I'm doing this because noise and stuff like that. So, I have a nice topic today, and I'll tell you how it came about. So, on the Ghostwriters podcast, every week we each try to read something interesting horror related, or we watch something. And I've been having a good time sort of catching up on my 1970s horror. I mean, I was born in the 80s, I missed most of this. So I like to watch 1970s horror movies. And the one that I watched for this week, we'll record tonight, was a movie called I forget. I'll have to write it down so I don't forget. I think it's called The Devils, but it was made in 1971, and it stars Oliver Reed. Now, I don't know. It was on Shudder, the streaming service for horror, and it definitely had some horrific elements to it. But I don't know that I would say that this was a horror movie. It's a Ken Russell movie, and the only other Ken Russell movie I think I've seen was Altered States, which is a weird one. And I would call that one horror just because it harkens back to, what was the name? The Murders on the Rue Morgue. I kind of get hints of that in Altered States. But the devils, something like that. This Oliver Reed movie. I don't know that I would necessarily call it horror, but I love Oliver Reed. Oliver Reed definitely was a man who appreciated his horror roots. One of his first major roles in a film was in Hammer Studios' The Curse of the Werewolf. And if you've never seen that movie, you really should see it. The costuming, the way the werewolf looks is amazing. The story is different. It's a 60s movie, and you're like, they always seem to unravel at the end. The last act always, like, but it's a good movie. But the thing is, Oliver Reed, he was interesting as an actor because, like, watching movies with him in it, it does become a game of, is he sober? Is he actively drunk? Or is he massively hungover? Now, I have to say, in the movie that I watched for the show this week, he was fantastic in it. Like, fantastic. This was his best acting ever. I honestly couldn't pick out drunk guy, Oliver Reed, and he was fine. But to circle back around, Oliver Reed is one of those celebrities, one of those famous people who has a lot of mythology around him. There's a lot of trivia surrounding Oliver Reed that is really fun. I love this kind of stuff. Some of it's gossip, some of it's fact. Go on IMDb and read trivia on Oliver Reed. Read how he died. Read the circumstances of his death. I'm going to talk about it tonight on the podcast. You're not supposed to laugh. You're not supposed to laugh at people dying. But I defy you to read how he did it and not at least go, whoa. Look, he died of a heart attack. That is the technical reason. The less technical reason, but the reason behind the reason is he was on a bender. He went on a drinking binge. Like, I would die too, to be perfectly honest. But he's someone who, there's a lot of mythology behind him as a person. And I got to thinking, I was like, that'd be fun to do with some classical writers, because I do a lot of research for the A Case for Classics podcast, and I keep running across all these weird little tidbits, and every now and then in like a biography, I'll run across a weird little tidbit where it kind of sticks. Because this is, I mean, let's not pretend that my brain is a trap for any sort of really interesting, enlightening facts. I hold on to stupid trivia and gossip about famous people. I don't know, I'm not ashamed of it, but I thought it would be fun to talk about a few of those. Now, another great thing about doing this, talking about gossip, is I don't have to provide any sort of sources. I can just, I read this somewhere, and that's all you're getting. But some of these are really fun. And some of these you probably heard of. Not all of these are like deep dives or anything. It's just fun. Today, we are back in the spirit of distraction and fun and funny stuff. So here we go. The first one I want to talk about is Hans Christian Andersen. Now, Hans Christian Andersen, I know him the most from The Little Mermaid, which, if you've never read that, give it a read. God, I don't always say this, and I wouldn't, but Disney improved the story. The story that this guy wrote is shit. It is so fucked up. That mermaid should, like, I wanted that mermaid to actually turn into a Selkie and eat the people. That would have been better. So Hans Christian Andersen was in England, and he was hanging out at someone's house. I'll get to that in a second. And he read a review of one of his works, and it was a harsh review. It was a very, very harsh review. Like, you get those sometimes, and you have to go sit by yourself for a little bit and absorb it before you come back around and realize, you know, well, I've given bad reviews on things people have loved. It's okay. It's okay. That is not what Hans Christian Andersen did. He was found in the back garden of this person's house, lying face down in the dirt, sobbing, all because of a bad review. Now, I can laugh. I've gotten bad reviews where I've had to go sit in the dark for a while, but he had to be physically picked up from the dirt, face down in the dirt of Charles Dickens's backyard. So, just having a complete meltdown over a bad review. He'd been staying with Charles Dickens for a while, had gotten on Charles Dickens' last nerve. He'd overstayed his welcome. He was a little bit of a high maintenance guest, insecure, and, you know, of course, he's staying with the greatest writer of the time, and it wasn't going well for anybody. That's funny. Now, Charles Dickens, this one isn't so funny, but it's, you know, I will eventually on the podcast talk about Charles Dickens, and I'm going to have to get into some of the things. Like, Charles Dickens was, you want to say, like many of his time, but that's an excuse. Charles Dickens was a creative person. It should not have been outside of his realm of ability to not be a disgusting racist, and yet he was. It seems to... because of the Meghan Markle and Prince Harry thing just coming out, it seems convenient for a lot of British people to forget that they've got a massive racism problem. Like, we talk about it over here in America. America has a massive racist problem. It does. Like, we talk about it, I have to wonder if at least it's better because we shine a light on it. But over there, it's like, don't talk about it. We don't have a racist problem. We're not like America. Yes, you are. I'm sorry, but yes, you are. We can talk about how to fix it. We can talk about how to be better. I'm not the person to talk about it, but I'll contribute to whatever charities to make it better. I'll do that. But yes, the British people can be horribly racist. Charles Dickens was a horrible racist. Charles Dickens also committed his wife. When he reached, I believe he was in his 50s. Now, again, I don't have to cite sources, so I'm going to ballpark here. I believe he was in his 50s. He'd been married to the same woman for decades at this point. Had a long-lasting, fully functional marriage. He had her committed to a Victorian-era sanitarium, mind you, because he wanted to live with a younger woman. Fuck you, Charles Dickens. That is a thing. Now, the next one is around this time, a little later, we're a little more modern now. C.S. Lewis was very much a respected writer. It had like a writer's circle going on, and he was good friends with this guy that all of his other writer friends thought was kind of weird. This guy was more of an academic. He was kind of cloistered in his book room. I believe it was at Oxford. It could be Cambridge. I always get them mixed up. I'm so bad about that. I do it with Harvard and Yale too. State University girl. But this whole group of writer friends thought that C.S. Lewis's friend was a weirdo. They, kind of, why are you friends with this guy? Why do you keep reading his stuff? Why do you keep telling us to read his stuff? All he writes about are trolls and elves. That guy, J.R.R. Tolkien. I mean, I don't know if this writer circle ever really came to embrace him. J.R.R. Tolkien, another horrible racist guy, like, woo! Ooh, there's some things there. Also, personally, I can tell you, I will not be covering him on the show because I've read him. I've read The Hobbit. I've read the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I read the Silmarillion. I think I read the book on Tom Bombadil that his son Christopher kind of finished. It was finished posthumously. I like fantasy, but God, I can't do it. Was that guy being paid by the word? Because books are boring as hell. I know, subjective, because I've been told, I've expressed this opinion to fellow writers and been asked, what is it like being so wrong? So, whatever. But my podcast, I don't think I'll be talking about Tolkien. I just think it's funny that all these people made fun of C.S. Lewis for being friends with him because he was the ogre and elf guy. Next, F. Scott Fitzgerald. Now we will talk about him. I don't know that The Great Gatsby will be the first book of his that I cover. I mean, it's having a moment, which is fine. I mean, I like to see revivals like that, but it's not my favorite. However, if you know anything about F. Scott Fitzgerald, you know that his marriage to Zelda Fitzgerald was a famous one. Little side note there. I found when they put out the latest The Great Gatsby movie, there were all of these how to drink like the Gatsby, how to drink like you're in the jazz age. So I found this recipe for a cocktail that this person who wrote this article, they posited that they would have drank this at one of the Gatsby's parties. This would have been a very famous cocktail. You gotta remember, this is in the era of Prohibition. So maybe the bathtub gin was a thing, but this is disgusting. This cocktail consisted of three things. Egg white, moonshine, buttermilk. No thank you. Dear God, no thank you. Is it supposed to taste like puke before you drink it? No. Anyway, back to the Fitzgerald's marriage. Zelda and F. Scott, it was at times a very passionate marriage, a very productive marriage, and at times, Zelda got kind of fucking sick of her husband's shit. Living with a creative is hard. Living with a successful creative, I have to imagine, is a nightmare for many reasons. But they were having a rough patch, Zelda and Mr. Fitzgerald, and she made a crack to her husband about his equipment, about his penis. And this hit him to the quick. He didn't know what to do with this information, and it started to really bother him. So he went to one of his friends, Ernest Hemingway, and they had a little heart-to-heart, and F. Scott Fitzgerald said, hey, will you look at something for me and tell me truthfully if I am deformed? Will you tell me truthfully if something's wrong with it? And he exposed himself, whipped it out, if you will, to Hemingway. And, Hemingway was good about it. It was like, you're fine. That's all fine. That's all working out well. Put it away now. Thank you. So that happened. Next we have Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde, I could do 10 of these. I could do a whole series just on shit he said, shit he did. Oh my God. Now, Oscar Wilde, Mr. Quotes himself, was famous for being a dandy. He was, God, I should have linked it when I did the Portrait of Dorian Gray on the podcast, but there were a lot of cartoons, satirical cartoons making fun of Oscar Wilde and his dandyism, especially here in the States. He had notoriety over here as well. So if you look at photographs of him, you can see he was very particular about the way he dressed, but he was also highly dramatic. Your very stereotypical gay man, fainting on couches. The hyperbole was big with this one. He was also 6'3", which even now, that's tall. You would see a 6'3" man and that's a tall person. In his day, that was enormous. So he towered over everybody. And there's a story of the father of one of his lovers. I'm assuming this lover was underage just because it was Oscar Wilde. The father of one of his lovers, who was like a famous pugilist. This guy was a boxer. He started a boxing club in London. He was going to go and find Oscar Wilde and kick his ass. So the guy gets there, and Oscar Wilde stands up, and, the guy has to look at him like this, and Oscar Wilde pulls a gun on him. And is like, I'll shoot first and ask questions later. Obviously, there was no fight after this. You dandy and dramatic, flamboyant man or not, he was still a 6'3" man, armed and pointing the gun at the guy. So there was no fight. What else do we have? Oh, Mark Twain. Someone we will definitely cover. You can't leave Mark Twain out of the conversation. He was really good friends with inventor Nikola Tesla and scientist. I can't forget that. They were really good friends. And Mark Twain was up in New York visiting Nikola Tesla, and he was complaining he was suffering really, really bad, really painful constipation. And, Nikola Tesla heard that, and he was like, oh, I'm going to go off and quietly try to fix this. And he built this massive platform that vibrated really violently. And the next time Mark Twain came over to visit, he, directed Mark to stand on this platform. And I don't know. Some stories say he didn't tell him what it was for, and some stories say he did. He understood what was supposed to happen. But he flipped on the power, and the platform started vibrating violently. And within moments, Mark Twain was sprinting off of this platform to the bathroom. It fixed him. I wonder if that is universally fixable. Like, really bad constipation, just literally shake the shit out of you. And then the last bit of gossip. Now, this I actually got from a book. But it is still treated like gossip in the book. Mary Shelley. Mary Shelley, I wish I could talk more about her as a person and not so much Frankenstein, the book I don't like, because she was interesting. So her husband, her husband, she was only married once, was Percy Shelley. And this guy, despite people now trying to paint their romance as this really cute, gothic, star-crossed lovers thing, it wasn't. He was horrible to her. And, when she finally had children that lived. She devoted all her time. She had so many children die. She had miscarriages. I think she had a stillborn. She had so many children die in infancy. She had a child who she was very much attached to die in early childhood. So her one remaining child, she was kind of obsessed with because of that. And her husband was jealous of his own child because it was taking his wife's attentions away from him. There's a whole other thing about his divided attentions anyway. The guy was a friend of Lord Byron. That should tell you all you need to know. If it doesn't, look it up. Lord Byron was a scumbag. However, his constant ragging on Keats is hilarious. You should look that up. Now, having said that, Mary Shelley, she was widowed very young. Percy died in that boat accident, drowned. They were very young. So she was a woman who, before she got sick later in her life, and I think it was smallpox that she got. I can't remember. It was one of those, she should have died, but she didn't. But it definitely messed her up for life. She was forever kind of sickly afterwards, and it caused a lot of her hair to fall out, and she just looked sickly thereafter. But before then, she was a very healthy, hearty woman. Not hearty, but alive and blushing, and she had this long auburn hair that was, everybody noticed it about her. Everybody fawned over her hair. And afterwards, she, not so much. Her hair was very thin, and she had to wear it a certain way so you couldn't see how thin and fine it had gotten after her sickness. But there was still a lot of time between Percy's death and between this sick time where she was a very healthy, very active woman. One has to wonder what kinds of romances popped up. And there was one, whether it was a romance or a crush, a unrequited set of feelings is unclear. We don't know how the man felt about her, but we have enough information to at least speculate she was very much in love with this man and wanted to marry him. And that man was American Washington Irving, the author of Rip Van Winkle and Sleepy Hollow. I think that I find that so interesting is because it kind of blew my mind that they lived in the same time period. Like how the fact that Anne Frank and Martin Luther King Jr. were born in the same year, how that kind of messes with your grasp on time. That kind of did it for me. But I thought that was really interesting. And that'll do it for today. I've been blabbering on. Just my stupid classical gossip. I don't know. Maybe I'll do another one of these. If you like these, I can do another one of these. I can start writing down these little tidbits as I come across them. These are just the ones that kind of stuck with me. Like, I find the one about people making fun of C.S. Lewis for being friends with Tolkien so funny. Just because he's taken so seriously now. Like, Tolkien's the father of restricting access to Beowulf because he was a weirdo. Anyway, thank you so much for being here week after week. This week's show for the podcast, I'm going to do Robert Frost. Just because I've been in kind of a poetry mood, and I think Robert Frost is like, that's step one to getting into poetry. It's like stepping into like the perfect temperature bathwater. That's the best way to be introduced to poetry, in my opinion, is Robert Frost. And there's interesting stuff to talk about there. So stay tuned for that. And if you have anything you want me to talk about, if there's any questions you have, let me know. And that'll do it for me this week. I got the remote. Let's see. Is it going to do me dirty? It's been acting weird. I might need to get a new battery for it. But thank you, as always, for being here. And I will see you next Tuesday. Turn off. You're not going to